Don't quit when it's hard, quit when it's easy. I learned this from a lot of martial arts and, quite frankly, just being a homeless kid for a while. It's very easy to give up on something at your worst point. It's easy to fail on a diet. I used to be pound conversion 330, 340 pounds. I used to be a very large dude as well. I was very good at giving up on shit, including myself. And the way I got through a lot of that was when it was really hard, when it really sucked, when everything was going wrong, I went, cool. Tomorrow, when I wake up and it's slightly easier, I'll quit then.
Welcome back to Worldie Unboxed. Today, we're excited to bring you a conversation we had a little bit ago with Lewis Thompson-Milne, a straight-talking business coach who guides entrepreneurs through the chaos of business and personal mastery. Lewis's journey spans Fortune 100 boardrooms, side hustles, and nonprofit leadership, all driven by his mission to empower high-achieving entrepreneurial thinkers who dare to dream big. Having faced his own battles, Lewis combines system thinking, martial arts, self-development, and neuroscience into a coaching style that's anything but typical. In this episode, we'll explore Lewis's no-frills approach to coaching, his journey of personal transformation, and the hard-won lessons that have shaped his unorthodox yet highly effective methods. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, his insights will inspire and equip you to navigate your own entrepreneurial path. Join our community at worldiebrand.com and subscribe to the Worldie YouTube channel for more insights and highlights. All right, let's talk to Lewis.
You realize that you could do coaching kind of on a full-time basis? Did it start as a side hustle? Just kind of like walk us through those early days of considering it versus going after it and realizing, you could do this full-time.
Look, I was really rolling with it part-time. I really started finding some clients part-time. I really invested myself wholeheartedly into researching and fact-checking my biases, right? Which, spoiler alert, is how we really deal with a lot of biases. And I realized that the more I searched, the more I found people that I felt to be credible, trustworthy, authoritative, and really have some viable advice. So I also started getting coaching because I thought, all right, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and I'm going to spend some money on these high-end coaches and really go, does this make a difference to my life? And ironically, spoiler, it did, right? So we had a significant life change. We shifted country to bring our son closer to his grandparents. And I thought, it's really my time to get my shit together. I'm going to shift this from part-time and I'm going to go full-time. I know entrepreneurialism. I know I have a grinder mindset. I know I'm capable and I'm really passionate about it. So I'm going to go all in. And very quickly, it became obvious that this is 100% what I should be chasing.
And, what are the reasons that people come to you? You mentioned kind of the profile of person, but what are they looking for, or what are they kind of struggling with when they come to you?
First of all, struggle is a poor framing. By framing, I mean the way in which we position that discussion, right? If we say struggle, we're almost implying that there is a deficit, right? I've blown my shoulder out. I have to go to a physiotherapist. I'm struggling with it. If we go back to the weightlifting analogy, you might find that the thing they're struggling with, or their issue point or reason they would come to me is, look, I've done some great stuff. It's not landing. It doesn't feel right. I feel like I've been in a career for 20 years. I'm doing extremely well, but I don't like what I'm doing, the direction. It doesn't feel like I'm happy. A lot of reasons that I've found, particularly recently, let's say post-COVID, is I'm burnt out. I'm beyond burnt out. I don't give a shit about anything. I just stopped caring. I've been phoning it in. In the entrepreneurial space, I was surprised to find that there was a lot in that area too. People are like, I've just been hustling for years. And there's got to be a better way to do this. There has to be a more efficient way to do this. There has to be a cleaner and easier way to do business that doesn't burn me out. I don't want to exchange the 9 to 5 I had for the 9 to 5 I've now given myself. So a lot of it is to do with when you feel there is a significant mismatch. There's something up, there's something off. There's something that I know I could be doing that I'm not. Or simply they just want more growth. I've got a few clients that are actually coaches that are just like, I just want a bigger business, straight up. And it feels like you're a fit in that space.
And do all of your clients reach out to you first, or do you reach out to people and gauge to see if they're maybe interested in working with you too?
There is a mix. I don't ascribe to the idea of cold marketing for coaching. My game is specifically high ticket, right? My game is about building a relationship with a client base for a longer term of engagement. I don't like the idea of hourly. I don't like the idea of shallow. It's quite frankly shit. It's a terrible model, and what it results in is subpar results. So I can't almost by definition then enter into a cold call, cold DM, cold outreach. I have to build a relationship with people and then see if it's a natural step for them. So my entire model is hinged around building those relationships.
So then on a week to week basis or day to day basis, if I'm your client, like what does it look like from my end?
Depending on our engagement model, I have some clients that are on a retainer. They call when they need it. I have one C-suite leadership member who only calls me when he's about to have a really shitty meeting. But he's kind of an anomaly. More often than not, it's either weekly or fortnightly calls. We'll do calls because obviously I'm way down in New Zealand. I do have some localized clients that I'll go and do workshops and things with, but it's usually a weekly or a fortnightly call model. And that will involve deep diving, pivoting to whatever we want, or aligning with the goals. It's very specific to each session and the journey of each individual person I'm working with.
And how do you build those initial, because you mentioned you have to build the relationship first. How do you go about finding these people and building these relationships? Is it mainly LinkedIn? Is it other platforms?
I enjoy LinkedIn as a marketing avenue because by definition, you imply credibility. I'm not the 400th copywriter in your inbox. I can demonstrate my capability in an environment with which the stakes are higher. I could spam this on LinkedIn. The stakes, there's nothing there. I could make shit up and just ghost, right? But my professional credibility, my personal credibility is on the line in LinkedIn, and that's what I enjoy. Outside that, I go to business networks and meetups. I'm part of various professional groups. I have a lot of connections in the Fortune 100 space and the executive space that I then tap and go, hey, who do you know in this area? Keep an eye out for me. The usual kind of closed network or warm network.
And do you have a story in terms of maybe one client you worked with that stands out in terms of maybe where they started off versus where they got to, or maybe some breakthrough or epiphany, something like that?
Yeah. I'm not going to name names, obviously, because I can't. That's confidential. Everything I do is a confidential basis. And a lot of, as you would understand, a lot of people that are actually doing this still perceive it as help until they work with me for a while and therefore don't want to be seen to be needing help, especially in the entrepreneurial space because it's a very small community. I know one who was working 6-7 days a week. We finished working up with him in November. When we started, his whole pushback was he was looking to diversify some of the work his business did. We cracked into it and realized that he actually had what he described as a tendency to be too trusting, and he was getting stiffed on invoicing, which sounds innocuous enough. We kept digging, and the epiphany we had was he actually had a people-pleasing streak. It was leading to him getting pushed over by his staff, pushed around by his team, pushed around by his clients, and we really cracked into that as a conflict avoidance. When we broke his conflict avoidance and started doubling him down on what he actually wanted, he very quickly, in the space of 2 months, went from working 7 days to working 3 days, and now he part-time consults for his own business and is functionally retired. Right? So we found the cascade of epiphanies that really led to the root cause. And once we addressed the root cause of behavior or the way he really interacted, his own capability carried him for the rest of the results. That's not me when it's a him. When I could name a couple of other clients, that some that are working with major logistics firms, some that are working with major telcos, some that have their own new startups, and they're finding a newer, more authentic way to do this. They've done the burnout cycles, they've done the exits, they're over that, and they have no time for their families when they're doing that. So now they want something that's more balanced, more focused. A big win. And this happens with a lot of my clients, and it's probably one of the best and most consistent wins, is when they realize that they are the thing that determines their business as well as their home life. And that they are, in fact, the same thing. There is no concept of balance in the entrepreneurial world. There's only the concept of integration. So you need to balance across both sides of the coin and find a way to make both work together. And the center point of that is always you. Right? So how you view the interactions with your family and the world and your communication, both in business and at home, how you view trouble and difficulty and stress and resilience, how you view even basic calculations or interactions in marketing spaces, right? You and I have spoke at length, and I can hear the way in which you write things, the way in which you frame your world. And if I know the way in which you frame your world, then I can predict reliably, to a certain extent, the way in which you're going to interact in certain situations. So it becomes easy for me to then step in and say, well, how would you view this situation? Where and how has that worked or not worked for you? If it doesn't work for you, where and how do you think that has become a problem, and how do we re-engineer that? Where do you want to go with this? Right? A great example is like a hierarchy bias, right? A hierarchy bias is just a fancy way of saying, I believe in the world there is leaders, managers, whatever, and then me. I see this at home, I see it at work. It usually comes from some early childhood authoritarian kind matrix, which we're not going to get into too much here because it gets a bit weird. But it manifests in a really toxic way at home, right? It works when we're in a corporate 9 to 5, not so much when you're suddenly the boss in a leadership position in an entrepreneurial space, or when you're at home, because you naturally want to assume. You assume that you or your wife is the boss. There's no commonality, there's no middle ground. You assume to, or you attempt to position everyone in levels. In an entrepreneurial space, that kills you because there's no teamwork, there's no collaboration. Co-founders don't really work well in that space. That's usually when the rift happens, when someone tries to do this kind of vying for control, and then it becomes a fight, right?
That makes sense. And you mentioned earlier that your clients are willing, right? And everyone is stubborn or unwilling in certain situations. So how do you deal, or what does it look like when maybe there's pushback on something that you've said, and how do you work through that and then get to something that makes sense for the client?
It's a hard question, man. Thank you. Look, my value, I make this very open and honest, right? The first part of my engagement is about a zero judgment space, right? There is zero judgment. Everything is observation. Everything is fact until proven otherwise. There is no vested interest in me getting you towards a goal or sabotaging your career. My role is to be that sounding board, to be that middle post. So when I say things that directly confront people, if I've done the other work that I need to with them, then they can recognize it for what it is, a contribution of value or a contribution of perspective that they haven't considered. But that doesn't change the fact that you're correct. People are stubborn. People have things that are difficult to move or work through. So the way I would work through that is, it depends on what the actual event is. I would take it back to core facts. I would make it as least or as less personal as I possibly could. I would try to step them into a space of observational reality, observational fact. And I would posit analogies or stories in which they could, what we call cast, or essentially say, okay, I can look at this objectively when it's not me and go, which way should I play that? And then I let them form the reality, because the answer quite simply is, it's not my job to convince you. It's my job to present a strong enough case that you should be convinced, but I don't control you, right? You're an individual. There's no reason for me to force your hand, and nor should I. If there is any coach ever to anyone that is trying to force your opinion in a certain way, they are a failure as a coach.
And what's one thing related to mindset that you think all, or just about all, entrepreneurs basically could do a better job with?
I think it doesn't matter whether your journey is 3 days in or 20 years in, or you've had 7-figure exits. There is always someone we compare ourselves to. And as cliche as the saying is, it really does rob you of joy or the enjoyment of the adventure or your own accomplishments. And a lot of what I do with my clients at any level is celebrating wins so that they remember to celebrate them themselves.
And then you talked a little bit about how the word struggle, that's not the right way to frame things. And I know just in general, we've talked about framing, the importance of reframing. So what are some things in the startup world or with entrepreneurs in general that you feel like they need a reframe, other than this word of struggling, for example?
The word help needs a reframe, just generally. Help is something that carries strong connotations of required assistance rather than additional support. Help is a strong one. What's another great one? I mean, I swear to God, if I hear the word multi-six-figure one more time, I'm going to go crazy. either 6 or 7 guys. Let's draw a line in the sand on that. But as far as reframing goes, help is going to be the strongest one. Obviously, I have a vested interest in that one changing. But I think it's so situational. It almost varies by industry, the amount of and person what needs reframing. Help is a strong one. Support system is a strong one. Even proactive terms like what happened in the call this morning? There was one in which we mentioned growth. I think growth needs reframing. I think growth is too implicit as it is. And I think it carries too much pressure, and I think it carries too much connotation. And I think it's definitely not a shared term. Right? But we swing it around like a death club. Have you grown? No, but I'm already earning 7 figures, so who cares, right? But there's so much context and pressure around growth that we need to really either clearly define it or just reframe what it means to people.
And then what advice, just general advice, would you give to, this is people in Brandon's situation, basically people who are parents and entrepreneurs?
General advice?
Yeah, general or specific. If you want to give specific advice, that's cool too.
I'll take either.
Awesome. You're smiling, so that's a step up. Clearly, it hasn't been an early wake-up day. My advice is sleep when you can. I think it's the most Jack Reacher advice I could give you. But specifically, look for parallels, right? We often fall into this trap of I'm managing at home and I'm managing at work and I'm trying to do this juggle. And as I said, it's almost like 2 businesses. So I tend to try and advocate that people see themselves as a multi-business CEO. Where and how do I alleviate and mitigate these responsibilities in a cohesive way across? It's not, hey, things are going off at home and I have these. There's still a priority. Don't get lost in the combination of the two, or don't get lost in the separation of the two, but recognize that they're the same thing. They're all part of what you do and who you are, and you can only give so much. So pick very selectively where and how you apply that effort and energy.
And then, sorry, go ahead, Brandon.
No, I said that. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. And I feel like I've kind of done that in the past, and maybe it's like a military thing. We like compartmentalize a lot of stuff, and like you've got to kind of segregate things and make sure that you have enough energy and action for each task or each relationship. But I noticed that it kind of always the ante's kind of getting up there, and this isn't a question that we kind of had prepared, but as the
so good, I prefer it when it's not prepared.
right on. As an entrepreneur like takes on more, like what's your advice? So for instance, in a situation that Aaron and I will be in here in the near future, having to take on jobs because we're bootstrapping, what kind of advice do you give in that situation when you add even another dynamic to that equation?
Clearly define when the pressure isn't on what the boundaries will look like. In the parenting scenario, if you're asking for your own parenting balance, it's kind of easier for Aaron not to assume everything, Aaron, but unless you have a litter of children, this is probably not super relevant for you. But it would be before the pressure is truly on, really on, right? To sit down and go, is my priority, if it comes to this, what we call the shit hits the fan, right? When it really gets to crunch time, when the suck is upon us, where and how do I tier this priority list? What is my decision matrix? If my kid is sick, is that going to override an urgent, whatever this is, override an urgent deliverable? If my wife is at home for whatever reason and I need to be there, or isn't at home, or my partner isn't at home, or whatever the situation looks like and I need to be there, am I going to go home and be grumpy and miserable and shitty? Or am I going to go all in knowing that I can allot time later on? Build those matrices and decision frameworks when the pressure is not on. Don't get to the moment and then try and figure out what to do. Obviously, you can't account for everything, but there's big ticket items. The second Aaron, watch for his face change. The second you pick up a phone and you see the call is from daycare or childcare, you're like, oh, my day is done. Awesome. Right?
Yeah.
It's done. Brilliant. Cool. You look at it in this sheer shock. You're having a great productive day. You're smashing meetings. You're smashing output. You're like, well, right?
Yeah.
But it's okay to be patient with that. because then you have to pivot and realize that your job is to be present in that situation, not thinking about work. So when you're in a bucket, be in that bucket, but plan for those buckets beforehand to decide which one you sit in.
Yeah, I think that's pretty solid. That kind of meshes with a lot of things that I've been kind of taught throughout training, like building these plans at ground zero or ground speed zero, so that when you, from an aviation background, when you're actually in the jet, you're going several hundred knots an hour, you're not having to create a plan on the fly. You're kind of leaning back that plan that you created.
You had a baby. You're already in the jet. You've been there the whole time. Your ass is never allowed out of the jet. If you pilot it wrong, the kid's like, I saw that. Okay, cool. Okay, my bad. Right? So you're always in the jet.
Yeah.
This is why, and being an entrepreneur, you don't even need to be a kid. Being an entrepreneur, your business doesn't sleep. You're already in the jet. You're always in the jet. The only difference is, are you going high speed or low speed? And when you're low speed, you're probably more equipped to make a rational decision.
Yeah.
Versus the, oh shit response. What do I need to do in the moment? Let's react. Right. So take a lot of that pressure off by going, okay, here's the framework, or write it down, or whatever that looks like. But yeah, awesome. I'm glad that lands.
Does land.
And then
inadvertent plane.
Plane joke, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Throw that in there.
Yeah. And then I guess same question for first time entrepreneurs, because we're both doing this for the first time. Essentially everything that we're doing, we're figuring it out as we go. So do you have any recommendations for people in that, and basically our seats?
Be a lot more patient with the situation and yourself than you'll give yourself credit for. I know that sounds kind of fluffy, but when you do it, you have a lot of expectation. The difference I find between, let's say, your first and second business is, in your first business, there's 1,000 milestones. There's 1,000 things you want to accomplish. There's all these accomplishments you want to do. Even these minor things seem like great wins, and they'll also be crushing defeats, which would be my second piece of advice. But with the second one, you're like, okay, this is going to take time. Consistency is important. Clear planning is important. Making sure I know what I'm doing, making sure I'm taking the right steps, but also not being action biased. Moving forwards is important. There's a lot of fear and pressure when you first start. So it really is that step back and take some of that pressure off all of those eagerness items. Followed, unfortunately, closely by the second one. It's going to be up and it's going to be real down. And there's no way around that. That is literally part of the journey. So as they say, embrace the suck, right? Step into it. When you feel high, when it goes well, when you land a deal, when something hits a major milestone, you are literally going to feel like whatever deity you choose to represent or worship. But you are going to feel like a piece of shit when it hits the bottom. And the important point is, the ones that stick it out through that bottom part are the ones that succeed.
And then you talk a lot about boundaries. We've talked about that a little bit already on this call. One of the things that I notice with entrepreneurs is they basically define themselves. Basically, their business is how they define themselves. So if their business is up, they're up. If their business is down, they're down. Do you have any recommendations in terms of pulling apart those two identities, your identity as an entrepreneur and your identity as just a person?
Yes. That is an extremely powerful question, because what we call identity psychology is a paramount reason why people burn out, right? It's a paramount reason why in a 9-to-5 you burn out. I am my work. I am my value contribution. I am not individual. Therefore, my level of hierarchy determines how good I am as a person, my self-worth. I would work with people specifically on self-worth, but the key thing I would give as an immediate technique is to sit back one day when you get a piece of quiet time and close your eyes and try and think about what your business looks like a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. Be that filled with team members, multinational, multi-global, whatever that looks like, and recognize how small a piece of the puzzle you actually are, right? It's important to look at your business as a living, thriving entity, and then go, okay, now what does this look like when I only work 3 days a week? What does it look like when I work 1 day a week? And what does it look like when I'm not even here? What does that look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? Is it successful? Is it amazing? What would I then do with my life? And what that does is it creates a rift cognitively in your mind, and it goes, okay, my business is an entity. My business is a child. Your identity is not a child. but my business is a child. A child goes and does their own thing. I'm sure your co-founder will tell you, you can invest everything in it, but if you have a toddler, there's going to come a point where they're like, fuck you, I'm going to go do this, right? They've got zero shits about what your opinion is and your identity. And you're left kind of going, okay, well, I guess I'm the strange dad at the park standing by myself now. It's just like that with a business. Your business should stand on its own legs. It should be individual from you. And the best value you can contribute is to split the identity of you from that business. Then it's about how you contribute value to the growth of that identity.
And then just a related question, because your business is essentially you, right? Like
Me.
You are your business, right? So how do you think about where your personal brand kind of ends and then your company brand starts, or can you not really pick those two things apart?
I function as almost a subsidiary. My personal brand is my open marketability. I function as a business. It's called Be Better Coaching, which is obviously on the t-shirt here and a lot of my invoicing and merchandise. That is a wider company that does other things. There's an app coming up and some other learnings and courses and cohorts and facilitation that it does. Currently, my personal brand is the biggest growth needle mover. Ugh, I hate using that. It's the biggest needle mover in marketing, right? And I need that because coaching by definition, consulting by definition, mentoring, strategy, training, all depends on credibility, authority, and trust. And people don't get that from a brand to start with. They get that from a person to start with. The resistance to trusting a person is significantly less than trusting a nameless, faceless business. This is why personal brand is so important, because I can be associated to a wider brand and everyone goes, oh, okay, by extension, the halo effect kicks in. And now that's a great brand if they trust me already. But I have to build that connection first. And as I said, what I do is relationship based. So you have to trust me as a person before I can be like, pay money to my coaching company.
And what does Be Better? This is a super broad question, but what does Be Better mean to you?
Everything. I could get Yoda-like here. I'm going to keep it really normie for you.
Get
right?
Yoda-like. Get Yoda-like.
Real normal. New Zealanders and Australians are known worldwide for being somewhat sarcastic, right? Often when I worked with people early on, and I was very immature in my own personal development space, but I would just say, look, just be better than this, be better than that person, be better than this, be better than the situation, to try and look at things objectively. As I got older, I realized that was a recurring theme for myself. The evolution of my life has been a constant chasing of being a better version of me. There is an emphasis within my logo on the be rather than the better. And the answer for that, or the reason for that, is because I want people to actually just learn to be. Be you, be authentic, be more you, just be. And then do that better. Rather than accusing someone of not being good enough and therefore having to be better, the emphasis really sits on the be for me. And it's about teaching people to be.
That makes sense. And then you went through some kind of rebranding, right? Recently, was the result of that Be Better, or was it always Be Better?
No, it was always Be Better. Before I had the confidence to really put my name and face to it, I was running as Be Better when I was in my corporate life and basically subcontracting through my work environments. When I was working with senior leaders, when I was working with my own senior leaders, they basically only related to Be Better. It's changed iteration, it's changed design. The rebrand recently was more to own the personnel or the personal element of it, right? And really bring that brand to the fore and have some kind of cohesive picture. I'd had these bits that I've been playing with for the last couple of years and it really didn't land. It wasn't cohesive. And again, I'm trying to build that professional cohesiveness across brand and across offerings. And the easiest way to do that was to have a cohesive brand update.
And there's so much,
and it's already paid off.
I mean, there's so much noise out there that it's really hard to differentiate. So that sounds like one way that you can kind of stand out. Are there any other things that you focus on to try to stand out from other coaches or any other people kind of in the same space?
Absolutely. I don't lie to people. I don't try and be their friend. Obviously, this doesn't help. This is more once they're in the door. But when I engage with people, I make it very clear to them that the goal here is not for you to pay me as a very good friend. I don't need someone else to go out for copy with. My goal here is specifically to help you be more aware of what's holding you back as an individual. And a lot of coaches will chase the need, they'll chase the money, right? And they hit it with a very needy energy. It's very much, oh, I want to sign you up, and hey, let's talk for 45 minutes about all the cool things happening in our lives. Yes, there's a room for that. It's rapport, but the purpose and the value delivery has to be about you, and you're not going to like a lot of what that is, because if you did like it, you probably would have already been aware of it and fixed it. But it's about creating the safety and the zero judgment environment for that to happen without them feeling attacked. And that's the nuance that I offer over others.
And I know you used to, at least on LinkedIn, you would post kind of content, basically like mindset content for entrepreneurs, people like that. How are you thinking about content creation now? Because it seems like what you do really lends itself well to putting out content.
I didn't really understand the content game a few years ago. I was a late adopter to social media. I had some moderate success on Instagram for a separate business I had a few years ago, mostly predominantly visual. So I just picked the medium really well. So there was a lot of resistance to figuring it out. What I can say is, unfortunately, the echo chamber of what a lot of copywriters say. The more you write stuff, the more you realize everything can be written about. And I'm lucky. Coaching is the easiest thing in the world to write about, especially if you're in the life or business space. And I'm living and I run a business, so there's always something to write about, right? But I think a lot of people are more worried about the fear and the bias involved with writing something than they are about just writing something, right? We have all this pressure to make it meaningful and impactful and all this kind of stuff, and that will come. But the act of consistent writing, the act of consistent expression of thought, the act of consistently having to rein your brain in. I know you probably suffer with this with your background, but when you go to write something, it probably starts like this, and you cut it and you cut it and you cut it, and you go, okay, now this is digestible. But the act of doing that forces me to go and spend much more time with my thoughts. It forces me to get more concise. It forces me to be more articulate. It forces me to be more impactful. So I really just leaned into that as a methodology for expanding my writing skill set. And then that now just becomes part of my daily workflow. I see something pops into my head at night, I write a note down. I'm doing something with the family, I write a note down. A really shitty situation with a client or a business I'm buying or investing in, I write that down. All these kinds of avenues are avenues for abstract lesson. An abstract lesson usually speaks to a principle that can be applied across more things, and that's where impact happens.
And how do you stay up to date, or how do you educate yourself on everything related to what you do? So behavioral, I guess science, psychology, mindset, all that kind of stuff.
All that fun
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
Two key things that are a part of the way I've designed my business. There is a personal development budget for my business, and I consider that part of my business success. If I'm not making a budget on my personal development budget and putting the effort into spending it, I'm failing. That's one of my success criteria. I do that because it forces me to constantly engage in courses from other coaches. It forces me to go to events that are about development of behavioral sciences or psychology. It forces me to engage with people who are going to offer their own coaching to me, right? So I'm constantly doing that. In addition, the second criteria I have for success is a time budget. And that time budget is a minimum of 60 minutes every, let's say, Monday to Friday, every working day, that is dedicated to ongoing learning. What podcasts am I studying? And I stress the point studying. We had a discussion on this recently. I don't listen to a podcast. If I have less than 3 or 4 pages from a single meaningful podcast, I've not listened to the podcast properly. But this is what people do. They ingest, right? My job is to spend as long as possible digesting and breaking down the lessons from individual podcasts I listen to. Outside that, I read casually where I can. I read research papers. If a podcast mentions a bunch of really good research papers, typeset.io is incredible for this, by the way. You can look up a bunch of medical references and medical papers and just pull them apart. I can glaze, I can understand parts where I do or don't understand it. I can do the research to support that. All of that is self-development, but I dedicate at least 60 minutes a day to doing that.
And then similar question for a busy entrepreneur who's maybe not ready or willing to go down the coaching route. What should they be reading, watching, looking at just to be better?
Fantastic. Can you define what be better looks like in that scenario?
I mean, I was defining it basically the way that you defined it, but essentially like, I want to, maybe I want more time. I want better boundaries, or I want to just feel maybe less up and down based on how the business is doing, anything like that.
Mm. So what I'm hearing there is actually multiple streams of reasoning or thought, right? You have time management and productivity at play. You have emotional regulation and resilience with your ups and downs. It depends on the angle. There is excellent resources on YouTube. The problem is you have saturation. To be honest, there's some pretty good resources on LinkedIn, but it's mostly, there's just a lot of repetition and spam. YouTube tends to offer a better positioning. I would look to, if you're really just looking for a self-driven solution and you have time on your side, or you're at least focused on making a change, podcasts. I would tactfully select a very small handful of podcasts that you know to be reputable in the niche or industry that you want to tackle all the aspect that you want. Time management, productivity, you're going to sit with Tim Ferriss. Neuroscience, you're going to sit with Huberman, all these kinds of things. And go deep, right? Go really, really deep on them. And by deep, I mean literally start taking notes and studying it like you're back in school, or still in school in some cases.
So,
right, and that would be the first point of change.
Got it. So I guess with your clients, are you usually focusing on one thing at a time, multiple things? Because I know when I was listing off examples, you said that's maybe like three different things. So how do you tackle that as a coach?
Look, when you're doing group coaching, a lot of coaches don't do group modalities. I'm spending more time in the group coaching space this year. It allows you to be more niched and specific with the exact deliverable. But in a one-on-one engagement, it will usually start as something and move to something else and move to something else. A good example of this is often people will engage a coach because they have a goal, just one goal. And very quickly, when you work with a meaningful or impactful coach, they will help you realize that that goal was pre-framed by fear, pre-framed by judgment, pre-framed by expectation. And it was kind of a cop-out to start with. So the goal then evolves. So we say, okay, what do we need to get to that goal? And how do we evolve that goal? And how do we evolve that goal? It doesn't always have to be goal driven. Sometimes someone could just say, hey, look, I need better time management. I don't usually deal in that space, but you go, okay, where and how can I assist you in the mindset space? Maybe you're absorbing too much work because you can't say no. Maybe you're a people pleaser. Maybe you don't like conflict. Maybe you're really just trying to prove yourself to yourself or to someone else through grinding, through martyring. But from that, it leads to other things. Inevitably, it leads to other things, because the stuff that makes us do the things we do is a huge network of experiences and stories told to us throughout our entire life. So as you unpick that, things naturally come off. But the deeper you go in that chain, the more exponential the result of all of it.
So you work with people mainly on a group basis, not one-on-one, is that right?
No, I work mainly one-on-one.
Okay.
I'm doing more group this year.
Gotcha.
Because I've just had a drastic increase in people wanting to teach them how to build coaching businesses, which is nice, right? I've been doing it one-on-one with them, and it felt like a disservice to get new service agents or new service or startup agencies kind of kicked off one-on-one at a very high premium, whereas I can roll them all into a group and serve 10 or 20 people at once.
Makes sense. And then Brandon, did you want to ask any questions before I got into the rapid fire section?
Yeah, I'll throw one question out there, and it's kind of a callback to a LinkedIn comment that was kind of made. Maybe it was like a day or so ago, regarding distractions and being able to identify those distractions. An entrepreneur or a founder identifying those distractions and how to respond to them. I know in my post I was talking about it maybe from like a bit of a negative perspective, that distractions were bad. I think the connotation is that distractions are kind of bad, but is there anything positive that you can take away from that? And like, how would you coach an entrepreneur or founder through the process of identifying distractions and how to deal with them?
Shiny thing syndrome.
Yeah.
Right. That's the chain you're speaking about, right?
Yeah.
We talked about
exactly.
Yeah. Put it this way: I've had 10 courses, 6 podcasts, 3 books, probably a handful of offers and programs. Shiny thing syndrome is real, right? Distractions are real. especially if you are new to the game, because you don't know what to expect. And when you don't know what to expect, there is a fear of the unknown. So we proactively fill that void with, here's a thing I can control. Shiny thing syndrome is very, very prevalent for new entrepreneurs. And the way I tend to immediately mitigate it, right? There's a whole bunch of other stuff around that, but how I immediately mitigate it is I implement what's called the 3 or the 6 month shelf. And I go, great, I had this incredible new idea. I'll do this all the time. It really pisses my wife off. I'll wake up on Monday and be like, this is my direction. And she's like, for fuck's sake. All right, cool. Just put a pin in it for a second. Right? I love the energy of a new idea or a new startup or a new venture. It's literally why I'm doing this, right? I really enjoy it. But it's also kind of the exact opposite of meaningful success and stability. So I have a 3 or a 6 month shelf, and I found that this works for a lot of my clients as well. Write the idea down digitally, physically, put it on a shelf. And that shelf either has a timer of 3 months or 6 months, depending on your tendency to pivot. This is even worse with clients that I work with that have ADHD, not because of their attentional deficit, it's just that they lose focus entirely. But you put it on this metaphorical shelf, you set a reminder to revisit it. If at that time, it still seems like a great idea, or it's been in your head the whole time and you just can't shake it, go with it. Just fucking vest. Go. Sorry, I'm dropping a lot of F-bombs. Just vest. Just go with it. Ship the thing. Do the stuff. Launch the product. Right? I tend to go, okay, 3 months for the really small stuff, 6 to 9 months for the really meaty pivots in my entire business direction. Right? And if I find that they've dwelled, I'll probably also have filled out more detail or fact-checked it or market researched it or done something to fill that little dopamine if I need to be moving on this. But it stops me wholeheartedly pivoting, which is the byproduct and the major problem with shiny thing syndrome. Not to mention that the massive OPEX to a brand new lean startup of just constantly hemorrhaging money on new stuff, right? You see it all the time, new systems, new software, new coaches, new coaching programs, new learning programs, just anything. Because it feels like it's control, but it's not, it's distraction.
And it makes a lot of sense. And I think that's pretty solid.
Yeah, I'd heard you mention that shelf idea before. And it definitely makes more sense.
It's a Stephen Bartlett.
Yeah, it makes,
honestly, full credit where that's due. That's a Stephen Bartlett device.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm definitely gonna do that with a couple ideas that I have. So I'll keep you updated on how that goes.
Please do, man. Please do. And accountability is a good one too, right? If you need an accountability partner, please not me. I'm not great at accountability coaching. I get distracted enough as it is. I don't need to be responsible for yours. But an accountability partner is really strong, either in a financial capacity, a time capacity, or a direction capacity. And when you go to them and say, hey, I've got this idea, and they can shut you down and tell you why, it helps fact check some of that as well.
Yep. So these next questions, it's going to be kind of rapid fire. So it's a decent amount of them.
Hit me.
So what's been your biggest learning so far as an entrepreneur?
Don't quit when it's hard, quit when it's easy.
And then what would you say is the hardest part about what you do?
Not doing it more? No. The hardest part is when I know I can help someone, and this is speaking to my industry, when I know I can help someone, but they don't want to help themselves.
And I'm still trying to digest that first answer. I don't know if Brandon,
I was like, man, you got to flesh that one out. Like,
yeah,
I know we were rapid firing.
Okay. That's called a quote card. Don't quit when it's hard, quit when it's easy. I learned this from a lot of martial arts and, quite frankly, just being a homeless kid for a while. It's very easy to give up on something at your worst point. It's easy to fail on a diet. I used to be pound conversion 330, 340 pounds. I used to be a very large dude as well. I was very good at giving up on shit, including myself. And the way I got through a lot of that was when it was really hard, when it really sucked, when everything was going wrong, I went, cool. Tomorrow when I wake up and it's slightly easier, I'll quit then. Right? Because right now I'm reacting. No matter what I'm doing, I'm reacting and I'm giving up, and that's actually giving up. So then the next day, inevitably, you've slept on it, it's easier, you've eaten because I was fat and hungry, you've eaten, you're less cranky, everything is easier to go, actually, it's not that bad. I have a better perspective now, I can expand my viewpoint a bit better and then go, okay, do I really want to stick with this? Form a bit of a rational thought. And it really just, all it is arresting that impulsive reaction. So quit when it's easy, not when it's hard.
Yeah, that definitely needed context. I think that makes sense now.
Yeah. You're the first
Awesome.
person who's actually done rapid fire answers. So it's like, it's kind of disorienting. I was like, oh, wow, someone actually listened to what we said and did the rapid fire.
Watch as I drone on for the next 6 questions. That's all right. That's good. Don't oversell me. Don't oversell
so the
me.
next question is, what's the most rewarding part about what you do?
The inverse of the worst part. When I spend time with someone and I get a text message. Here's a great one. Over Christmas, I got 3 text messages from 3 separate clients saying how much of a difference I had to their year, their impact, their life. I had a situation twice last year where clients' families got on the call to tell me the impact they've had at home, right? Working with them in business, working with them personally, yes, but the impact to their wife and kids or their partner and their kids. I can't describe how meaningful it is.
And what does success look like for you, either with your business, with life in general, however you want to define that?
Success for me is the ability to maintain and grow something that financially provides for my family through the method of service to others.
And then what's one mindset change that you're personally working on?
Sleep isn't the enemy. I've struggled with sleep my entire life, insomnia for multiple years. I know how to biohack and tweak sleep. I've even got a Whoop now to invest in my own kind of deal. But I need to stop viewing sleep as the enemy to productivity or time. I need to view it as the multiplier that I keep evangelizing that it is.
That's definitely a good one. And then we talked a little bit about people who are already entrepreneurs, but what advice would you give to people who want to be entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs?
Try. Just try. Just remove the pressure, remove all the bullshit you'll tell yourself. You don't need logos, you don't need websites. Think of a product, think of a service, think of something, try delivering it to people, see if you enjoy that, and then very clearly either build a plan to transition into it, which is doable. It's very doable. It's very simple. I'll probably do a post on it because it seems like it's a hot button topic. And then be very clear that you're actually in this, because it will test you. And often, just like parenting, you're thrust into it, not really realizing the depth of the complexity, the ups, the downs, the impact. And you either muddle through it or you go, okay, yep, this is it. And I'm going to enjoy that. I choose to enjoy the up and down roller coaster.
And then what do you know now that you wish you knew when you started out in coaching or with entrepreneurship in general?
I think there's a lot of mental stuff for myself that I wish I knew. But I think the most impactful one would be find where people are really hurting. And I mean this financially, emotionally, anywhere, product-wise, gap in the market-wise. It's about finding where people are hurting and serving those ones, not trying to save the ones who don't have that problem.
And then these last two are kind of non-serious or more fun. What's your favorite?
Am I not fun?
No, it is fun. It's just deep.
Absolutely.
It's deep.
It's deep. I'm hurt.
Yeah, no.
Okay, cool. Let's go.
So what's your favorite vacation spot in the US or dream vacation spot if you've never been here?
Oh, can I pretend Japan was a colony of America?
You can do that too, yeah.
That would be incredible. Okay, great. Japan is up there on my world tier list of probably about the 10, 15 countries and amazing amount of trips I've done because lucky and privileged. Japan's way up there for me, but I would say Maui in the US. Definitely Maui, not just because it correlates to where I currently live, but also because it's fucking beautiful.
Yeah. Yep. And we've talked a little bit of,
and the people are awesome.
I've never actually been to Hawaii. I want to get there, but
dude, give Waikiki a miss, but do Honolulu.
Okay.
Or Kauai.
Sorry, do Maui.
Yeah.
Yes, dude. Oh, sorry, we'll get derailed. Resume.
I was just going to ask, because we've talked a little bit about Americans and, we don't use Celsius. We don't say fortnightly. So do you have any just mindset things that Americans, you feel like we should either mindset or just in general, things that we should adopt that we haven't?
For Americans,
yeah, Americans.
I'm in trouble. Okay. I'm in trouble. No, look, I mean, I have a lot of American clients and we talk about this quite openly. I would suggest that look at how deep your bipartisan bias goes in the overarching framework of the way you look at everything. I have found, having served people in almost every continent for an extended period of time at a very deep level, Americans are very much brought up. You're born and bred to be in a bipartisan system, and that permeates every aspect of your thinking. It's very all or nothing. It's very left or right. It's very just or unjust. It has to be in one camp or another. And that drastically limits your optionality and your flexibility and your ability to experience the world.
And then this one is coming from my sister. So I don't know if you even like wine, but what's the best wine in New Zealand?
I am not an avid drinker, but I do belong to families that are. I think Marlborough Estates or anything from the Canterbury region is kind of top tier, which she will probably find out soon when she travels there.
Yep, right? Yep. Yeah, she's going in, I think, less than a month at this point.
Awesome.
That was it for me, Brandon, unless you had any last questions you wanted to ask.
No, that was good. Relevant answers to that rapid fire, especially the bipartisan one. Like, this is an election year here in the States, so
yeah,
it's bad.
Oh, yeah, that's even worse. I mean, can I just offer you guys an analogy on why that is actually relevant?
Please.
It doesn't have to go in the recording. I think it's probably important discussion or context. And feel free to add it if you want. It's the perfect example of mindset for Americans. You are brought up with political opinions in a household. The political opinion fundamentally shapes the course of your household. It's taught to you by authoritarian figures, whatever parental role that is or whoever that is, in whatever space that is. And they'll either have a strong opinion or no opinion, right? So you are taught, even in the act of having no opinion, that it's no opinion. I don't have vague ideas. There's no gray. I'm either all in or all out. And this bipartisanism is a structure. So as you grow, everything gets viewed through that more and more often. So your brain interprets that as a series of self-reaffirming success stories, right? I made a good decision. Didn't even consider that one. So this is clearly what I need to do. So your brain goes, okay, my way of processing is now bipartisan. And it is the best allegory for mindset creation because it happens across any story your parents have told you, traumatic events, even non-traumatic events. People who have had great lives have had situations that have been meaningful enough to form that, and it's become a self-perpetuating story. So it's a really good allegory for how your mindset works in general.
So is that not happening in other parts of the world? There's parents aren't really pushing political ideology on their kids?
Look, that's hit and miss by country, right? I can say in New Zealand with authority, no. I know in certain parts of Australia, potentially largely white parts, it is. But outside that, no. A lot of Asia, again, some countries yes, some countries no. India, very yes. I'm not even going to touch Russia. I know in the UK, again, it's probably a no, right? So it varies by country. But the issue isn't in whether they have a strong political value or not. It's in that most of the time, even if there is a predominantly bipartisan system at play, the significance is not given to it like it is in the US. And where there is a bipartisan system, there's always other options, right? There's always variant swing votes, all these kinds of other things. But the importance is not given to it like it is in the US, right? And it's that importance that tells your brain that it's significant to your survival. And anything that is significant to your survival becomes a framework for how you survive and interact with everything.
Makes sense.
It's just the annoying lessons we pick up growing up, which suck.
Yeah. No, it's a good one because I think that is a huge problem in the States, and it's super frustrating sometimes because it's almost like teams, right? It's like, oh, I'm blue team or I'm red team, and I'm just gonna look at this event through red glasses or blue glasses. I'm not going to be kind of like a rational, independent thinker. So super frustrating. And I think a lot of people notice that, but they still fall into that trap of being super partisan.
Well, that's why mindset sucks, because you're not aware of it. So the most interesting thing for me is when I see people very clearly articulate why an open mind is important. Now agree with my opinion or go away. And you're like, hold on, you've missed the boat. There's still a fundamental piece of your programming that is seeking that bipartisan equation in all elements of what you do, and it frames how you position things. I have a device with one of my clients where he'll start going, okay, I don't like that idea, I'm doing this. And I'm like, okay, are you shirts or skins on this one? Because he only has the two options, right? It's about working with that sometimes while you unravel the onion and get them to realize that it's got some really deep origins.
Makes sense. Makes a ton of sense.
I feel like we can have like a separate like episode just on that alone, and like why the US is like,
yeah,
an
election special podcast episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm down, and I promise I'll join on my phone straight away this time. You'll even get a consistent stream. No, look, I think you could. And I think the allegories for how it lands everywhere else in your life is incredible, to the point where you are such a big nation that it's now had the same effect in other countries that have had nothing to do with it. So it's like an infectious mindset that's then washed into other countries. Yes, there's political agendas at play, but it's washed into them, and it's amazing. Because again, where did everyone want to be when you were an 80s and a 90s kid like me? I'm going to go to the US. I want to be in Hollywood. I want to go and do all these cool things. It's the land of opportunity. Okay, cool. But most people haven't shifted out of that thinking. So they kind of idealize the rationale and the way of thinking and the mode of operating. And that then becomes a convincing factor for their own mindset journey when they haven't even been exposed to it. It's quite fascinating. Sorry, to a nerd, it's quite fast. I should put a disclaimer there, right? To a complete brain nerd, it's totally fascinating.
Yeah, that's a good title for you, brain nerd. I like that.
That should be my next LinkedIn headline.
Should, yeah.
Brain nerd. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Aaron said I'm a brain nerd. Come get your brain nerding done for free. Yeah, it'll be good.
Yeah, that'll be good. All right. Well, that's all we had in terms of,
awesome.
of questions, unless you wanted to ask us some last things in these last 10 minutes.
No, man. Just thank you for the opportunity. It was great to talk to you guys.
Yeah, it was super fun.
And it's good to finally put a face to the name.
Yeah, I know.
And also, you clearly hate football.
Yeah, I hate it with all my heart. But yeah, I think it's super fun to get a chance to talk, not in person, but in video, because I feel like now I know you. I feel a lot closer to you now, even though we've talked like a ton over the last year. But just one face-to-face meeting, it makes all the difference.
Agreed, man. And I appreciate it, guys. And I love what you're building. Honestly, it's I'm hoping you do long distance shipping when it launches. Just put it that way.
We could probably make an exception for you. I don't know if we will, but we could. I don't know if we'll do it for everybody.
Probably.
I meant probably not for everyone else, but for you, yes.
Okay, good. I was gonna say I love the you know what, we might. I'm not going to commit. I'm not going to commit until I know all the variables.
At the end of the day,
I have to make a
lawyers,
decision.
You know.
Yeah.
And this is being recorded, so
I love it. That's true. Have a great one,
you too, man.
I appreciate the time.
Talk to you later.
Thanks
Bye.
so much. All the best.
See ya.
Bye.